My name is Chris. I have survived every Tango operation, over 600 hours in the field. And this is my story.
I'm going to read to you the summary report for Operation Penta. Units were forced into guerrilla tactics. Aerial chaos split the whole war zone into smaller fractions. The weather conditions made things even more difficult, with the drought and troops short on supplies. Nevertheless, goals, objectives were achieved. The downed pilot, which was encountered under Operation Sierra in 2009, was recaptured in 2011 under Operation Penta by NATO troops. The identity of the pilot was still unknown at that point. While NATO was interrogating the pilot, an assault was formed on a NATO base. It seemed EFAF troops were also looking for the downed pilot. During the fire exchange with opposing forces, the pilot managed to escape again. He was injured in the firefight, but still managed to flee. 5 hours later, locals found him a couple of kilometers from the main NATO base, but they lost the pilot to a NATO hunter force group that was tracking him. NATO recaptured the injured pilot and handed him over to the Swedes in an exchange for a detonation case. It showed that the pilot and the case was the missing link for the NATO troops. When the pilot was found, his injuries had been taken to a turn for the worse. He had no choice but to reveal the code before he was handed over. Now, with the code and the detonation case in NATO hands, the bomb on the island could be remotely disarmed. NATO managed to disarm the bomb approximately 30 minutes before detonation. Swedish troops disappeared with the pilot after the exchange. EFAF during the whole time managed to defeat NATO troops in the area by using road war tactics, improvised explosives, devices, mines. Recon EFAF units operating behind enemy lines managed to work their way through enemy territory on the water using both lakes, looking for the pilot. Since it was there he was last seen. It was expected that the pilot would be extracted by air or Swedish combat driver units. Unfortunately, they never did manage to find the pilot before NATO forces. The outcome of the situation will forever remain unknown, or what really would have happened if EFAF would have found the pilot, gotten the codes and the detonation case. ACCF fought both sides by road blocking sections and infiltrating enemy checkpoints. They managed to retrieve vital information about the island bomb by taking hostages. Locals took over the island and demolished the device, making it more or less useless. If this happened before or after NATO disarmed it is still unknown. regular Swedish forces operating in the area, while Ranger units operated behind enemy lines, mapping troop movements. The first 36 hours was focused on marine operations, looking for the pilot and preventing enemy activities in the area. The Swedish Marine Rangers did locate the pilot, but only when it was too late. NATO Marine combat units satellite tracked the pilot and got him first. Successful recon missions and intel reportings led Swedish units to NATO forces and made the exchange possible, thanks to the operations further north. Heavy firefights broke out between NATO and opposing forces on site when the pilot was recaptured after he had escaped the second time. Swedish Ranger units managed to reach the pilot just in time. He was badly wounded when found. The pilot was escorted to safety at the Swedish mechanized base camp up north, where he got medical attention. This is known because several hours later the mechanized base camp was attacked by NATO as a last attempt to neutralize opposing forces. That was when the pilot was sighted again. Swedish forces fought alongside local forces against NATO troops until the last man standing. The battle and the facility was lost to NATO. In the fire exchange, NATO managed to get hold of a Swedish missile truck. It was escorted to the central parts near enemy borders, where it was supposed to serve as a negotiation tool for their own benefits by increasing the threat level. Things didn't fall out as planned though. EFAF forces managed to defeat NATO by ambushing them on site and repeatedly attacking them. NATO forces lost the missile truck, including the area, that day, and never got to the negotiation table with the UN and the Swedes. While on site, negotiating forces got the surprise of their lifetime when the Swedish Commander-in-Chief arrived. The pilot that has been hunted and tracked since 2009 didn't seem to be just a pilot. The Swedish Supreme Commander and the pilot is one and the same person, and has been all along. That is why the Swedish commander never showed up to the negotiations during Operation Tango Latitude. And that is the reason why Swedish forces operating in secrecy to be able to retrieve the shot down Commander-in-Chief and extract him to safety. The commander was shot down and captured while he was flying into the airbase up north to meet with the UN forces. Eastern forces managed to negotiate themselves access to the West Lake, which basically gives them the possibility to outflank threats within the conflict area. But the lake area is still dominated by Swedish Marine units, making it more or less impossible for anyone to penetrate Swedish waters as it is today. All major units such as NATO, EFAF lost their main bases to heavy firefights, forcing remaining units to fall back and regroup, leaving them scattered all over the place. At the end of Operation Tango, Penta, all involved units were engaged in guerrilla firefights. Everyone tried to take as much ground as possible, since Eastern forces agreed to the presence of UN supervision at the negotiating table. This whole situation set basic structure to upcoming operations. Arriving UN forces presented their first operations to the press as Operation Tango Evolution. Tango Evolution was the start of a new era for the Tango conflict, or at least it was supposed to be. UN forces weren't properly briefed, in which resulted in casualties within the first hour of their arrival. A major meeting between all opposing forces was totally crushed by local criminal units. Unarmed escorted troops were ambushed and captured on their way to negotiations at the main UN base. Everyone was taken hostage. UN reported crimes against human rights at the POW camp. Amongst the hostages was a journalist that witnessed the brutality. He managed to escape with several other POWs and reported the story. It seemed UN forces and police were struggling to negotiate with the locals for a peaceful solution. It partially succeeded, as the UN agreed on a safe passage out of the area for the ACCF, with all the weapons and ammunition they had collected from the opposing troops. ACC loaded all the PMWs on a truck and scattered them all over the area, making sure that an assault couldn't be formed against them in the near future. This bought them time and gave them the advantage to organise themselves. But UN recon units tracked the locals and led them to the ACCF weapon stash in the area, in an island area. An ACCF base was also found at the same time on a smaller island in the eastern lake by combat diver units. Regular troops used their own marine resources to race to the island for weapons and ammunition retrieval. Nasty firefights broke out on the island, leaving many stranded and abandoned. Remaining troops that managed to extract themselves from the island were seen by their commanders as lost, since no contact could be established. Soldiers had to re-establish communications and report themselves to Central Command. The only communications centre that was known was the ACCF command post in the centre area. This commanding hill was heavily defended and many lost their lives during the assault. UN troops could only stand by and witness the whole situation. Eventually the ACCF command post was lost and locals fell back from the area. The remaining forces that reported in were ordered immediately to the front line to assist fighting troops further north to desperately win back some ground. Within the time advantage for the locals, they could concentrate on areas that were left unattended or just poorly defended by the UN. One of these was the diamond mines up north. This probably means the ACCF are now heavily armed and financed well, posing a serious threat to all. The great question is, are they finally winning this? Summing up the whole situation, what started with good intentions resulted in a catastrophe. All the peacekeeping attempts failed. Now we have regular troops all over the area fighting guerrilla fights, locals more armed and dangerous than ever before, scattered special forces units and UN peacekeeping forces short on everything. This is a mess. How this mess will be sorted out and by who, your guess is as good as mine. But I know one thing. If we don't get reinforcements soon, we're all dead. I'm getting out of here. Over and out.